Welcome to our Portuguese Table podcast. I'm Maria Lott and the Azorian Green Bean.
And I'm Angela Simoes, and we're just two chicks dishing about Portuguese food, culture, and what it means to be Portuguese.
So grab a glass of vinho or un copo de café and join us as we talk about our favorite foods, reminisce about growing up Portuguese,
and interview some of our community's most successful chefs and food writers.
So sit down at our Portuguese table.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Our Portuguese Table. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hi, Angela. I am fine, querida. I am fine.
Good. Today's episode is with Lucy Pepper, or I should say Peppa, because she is a British national who's been living in Portugal for many, many years. She'll give us the details. I'm so excited. She's actually our first non-Portuguese, ethnically, non-Portuguese person on the podcast, but who lives
there.
And loves Portugal, I would say, more than some Portuguese people I know. So
it really is. It's all about the love of Portugal.
Right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Welcome, Lucy. We're so happy to have you here.
Hi, ladies. Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So for a little bit of background, I met actually, I've never actually met you. We've just been corresponding via email and phone. But I have a friend, Christine Horton, who lives in the UK, and she knows that we do this podcast. And she said, I have this friend who wrote a book. She lives in Portugal, and she wrote a book about how to not starve in Portugal. And so that's how we connected. And then come to find out, you've started this other podcast called Saudade. Stories of Saudade.
Yeah.
And you can tell us a little bit about that. And then you have another podcast called Pie, which is all about food, mostly Portuguese. So, there's just so much to cover. So why don't you just start by telling us.
Start from the beginning.
How did you end up in Portugal?
Well, let me see. So I came here when I was a tiny kid, just for a holiday, and loved it. But I was only 7, and it was in the 70s. I didn't remember. But then I came back with art school. We did a painting field trip in 1991. And I just went, oh my God, this place is amazing. And that was in the Douro, when we went in the Douro Valley painting, and we were in Porto, and I just loved it. But then I went back to England. We were only there for 2 weeks, went home, got on with my life, and kind of forgot about it. And then a few years later, I met my husband, who happened to be Portuguese. I went, oh, that'll do. And so I ended up here. I came here and I moved here in 1999. And then once I'd been here for a year or two, I was looking through a few old boxes of stuff, and I found a sketchbook. And in the front page of one of them, I'd found it was from Portugal, that Portugal field trip. And I'd scribbled into this front page, I'm going to live here one day. And I'd completely forgotten. Yeah, it was really, oh my God. So I ended up here, and we lived for a long time on the other side of the river in Azeitão, which is near Sesimbra, which you know, Angela.
Yes,
we were neighbours for a while. Short time, it turns out, even though we didn't know it. And I lived about 300 meters from my mother-in-law, which meant that I had to learn the language really, really fast, because there weren't any neighbours. I didn't have any friends around who were foreigners. There weren't any foreigners around in the village in those days that I'd met. Anyway, the first foreigners I met nearby was about 5 years after I'd lived there. So I had to learn Portuguese. So that was the greatest weapon I've ever learned, is learning a language properly. And then I just had this, this Portuguese life ever since.
Mm-hmm. And how did you learn? Did you take some classes, or was literally just immersion?
That's total immersion.
Total immersion. I came here, I'd read a book before I left when I was pregnant, so I had pregnant brain, that was called Portuguese in 3 months, and I don't know how I managed it, but I managed to sort of the very, very basics in about a week, and came here thinking, I'll be fine. And you know how Portuguese is, it's all smushed together like English, and you're like, oh my God. And it took me years to understand certain things, like the typical line, se Deus quiser.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing. What does it mean? I'm like, what does she think? My mother-in-law would say, I'd say, see you tomorrow, se Deus quiser.
Stish.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
Everything,
I took
everything, yeah.
ages understanding it because it doesn't sound like "se Deus quiser." It sounds like "se Deus quiser." So, it was total immersion, because if I wanted to talk to anybody, my husband was always working, he's a total workaholic, so I had to have quite great long conversations with my mother-in-law, and she's a real mother-in-law, Portuguese style, so like to be involved and stuff. And also we talked about food all the time because that was our sort of common language.
That
Right.
helps, yeah.
So that was how I learned, really.
Well, and this guy must be pretty phenomenal for you to make this kind of commitment and be immersed. And I'm dying to meet you, but I really want to meet your husband now.
Oh God. Well, I'm also very rash because I just went, sod it, I'm going. I just love it so much anyway. But no, he's great, and he's a historian as well, so he's very interesting, and very clever, and he's really useful to know. I can ask him anything. So why did so and so happen in 1966? Blah 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 blah, which is very handy to have around.
And so, do you speak Portuguese with him or English mostly?
No, only English. Yeah, because I met him when he was doing his doctorate in England, and so we've always had a rule as well that with the kids we only speak English with them at home, because everything outside of the house is going to be in Portuguese.
That's right.
Oh, beautiful.
That's awesome.
So
okay, so you've been talking with your mother-in-law about food, and then was the book the first thing you had this idea to write, How Not to Starve in Portugal?
No, I mean I wrote How Not to Starve in 2016 because it was I was asked to do that by a publisher, because I write a column in a newspaper. And I started off, after I'd been here for about 5 years, I was suffering massive culture shock and culture fatigue. And I needed to sort of express it. And as you know, Angela, I do a lot of just taking the mickey out of things. And so I wrote a blog for about 3 years, every single day. Nice. Wrote and drew, because my real profession is I'm an illustrator. And
cool.
That's what I trained as. And so I would draw and write something really taking the piss out of Portuguese habits, cultural things, And I had a massive following of lovers and haters from that, which
I can imagine. Yeah.
And over the years, I've sort of worked in various places, done like bits of pieces of work and things, and then I have a newspaper column. So that's how that publisher found me and asked me to write a book. And it was the most obvious was it's basically my life, how my life was in the first 15 years of living here. Of just, oh my God, they're crazy.
So what was the name of your blog?
Vitriolica. I was this kind of character called Vitriolica, who was this kind of archetypal English twit who kind of thinks she knows everything and looks down on all people around her. Oh, these Portuguese are rather odd, aren't they? Kind of thing. And years before, and about 7 years ago, my friend Celia Pedroso, who's a journalist, we got together and wrote a book called Eat Portugal. That's the other one. Which, because we were in a bookshop one day, and Celia looked at me, she said, there's a German couple over there. They're looking for a book in English about Portuguese food, and there isn't one. Mm-hmm. Shall we write one? and so we did. Yeah. So that's kept us busy for a year, and that's still on the shelves. We're in 5th edition now, I think. Now it's in French and Spanish too. Yeah. And then even before that, about 10 or 12 years ago, I wrote a book called O Livro das Receitas Nojentas, which is a book of disgusting recipes for kids.
Oh, jeez.
And they are disgusting. The food is nice, but it either looks disgusting or it has a disgusting name. Just
so like what? Give an example.
Oh, goodness me. Rotten teeth. Oh, that honeycomb candy that is like caramel, and it's got baking soda in it, so it gets all puffed up and airy. Mm-hmm. And that looks like rotten teeth when you break it up. And there were rat's brains and buried frogs, which was toad in the hole, I think. Yeah, so that was fun. So you can say that I'm a little tiny bit obsessed with food.
Well, then it's perfect for this podcast.
Yeah, because we're all obsessed with Portuguese food, so we're right there with you.
So when you got here, so did you have like a favorite thing whether it was a pastry or a dish, like right away, and then there something that you absolutely hated and still hate to this day?
Well, the first thing that appealed to me, I was shocked to be appealed by, was bacalhau à Brás.
I love it.
Would make huge piles of it. I mean, she can't just make like food for 2 people or something. It's always about 10. And so there's this mountain of bacalhau à Brás on the table in front of us, and I just loved it. I was horrified, though, at the time by cozida portuguesa. Because it was just wobbling, blubbery, hideous grey mass of kind of, just grey meat and things. Now it's one of my favourite things. I love cozido, but it's not for the way it looks.
Well, it's boiled. I mean, that is, it's your boiled meats and pig's ears and sausages and, your root vegetables.
Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a snout popping out. Great. So, and one of my missions is I sort of fight a battle between, because you know how popular Lisbon is at the moment, and it's very popular with all the travel guides and travel journalists and everything. But they paint a picture. They're all saying, "Oh, how amazing the food is," but what they're talking about is the prettified stuff that they see and the things that the 5-star chefs are making, and they don't tend to talk about things like cozido or like feijoadas and migas and things, which for me are much more interesting than chefified kind of workings of an alheira. And so I kind of fight a battle where I want people to try to know that these things are good, but they might be shocked by the ugliness of it. So because, if you find a really proper dish of feijoada in a tasca, it ain't pretty, and it will have little bits of snout. Like sometimes you find a nostril in it, and it's like, it's not pretty, but it's the most delicious thing you can eat. Mm-hmm. So I like to sort of demystify things, Portuguese food for foreigners. It's because it makes me laugh mostly.
Well, that's funny too. Just a bit of a side tangent. At least out here in California, one of the challenges has been on having a successful Portuguese restaurant, and the ones that have been successful are quite modern. I think it would be a real challenge to have a sort of home style cooking restaurant because things just look odd, right?
Exactly.
And people out here in California, I mean, unless it's the real foodie types that seek out the weird things to eat, but those are few and far between.
And it's so funny because those things aren't actually that weird. It's just that we in America, in England and America, have become so kind of prissy about what we eat that a wobbly
fish doesn't have a head or a tail; it just comes as a fillet,
exactly.
right?
I mean, I go absolutely mad with English people who come here and who won't eat a fish unless it's been filleted. Like, So my favourite thing is to give them a plate of jaquinzinhos and carapauzinhos that are just whole fried horse mackerel, and eat them the whole thing in front of them.
Right. Head, tail, and all.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's so good. Just crunching their little head off.
So crunch, I mean, that it is like a French fry. I mean,
exactly.
Completely fried. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Delicious.
It is delicious. So
and so then how did you start with the podcasts, with the Stories of Savad and then also Pai?
Well, let me think. So I've been working with Marco on various projects for about the last 5 years. We've written books together, made cartoons, animated things, drawn cartoons, lots of different things. And for years, he's a fanatical radio person, as am I. I grew up just listening to Radio 4. I don't know if you know Radio 4, but it's a spoken word radio station from the BBC. Huh. So we both love radio. And I've been listening to podcasts for years and years, since podcasts became a thing, because it was a way of keeping connected to Britain and America and Englishness and things. So, and I said, you have to listen to This American Life. You have to listen to This American Life. Yeah, when I've got time. Finally listen to it. And he went, yeah, we're making a podcast. and that was the start of the thinking about it and what it might be and things. And there are podcasts in Portugal. There's lots of podcasts in Portugal, but most of them are to do with, they're interviewing already very well-known people. There's a lot of like radio shows that are just rehashed as podcasts. And we couldn't find any other podcasts that were storytelling and telling real stories like we do. And we both like telling stories. We've both written a lot and tell a lot of stories. And so telling real stories of real people, of real Portugal, was the perfect idea. So that's what we do. And he's a journalist. I'm not a journalist at all. I'm a writer, but I'm not a journalist. So he does all the really hard work of finding people, talking to them, and he does also most of the editing. So when you hear the wonderful editing in our podcast, it's usually not me. It's usually him.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that Angela and I started this podcast.
Yeah.
Is because, I mean, we have, obviously this is a different turn. We're here in the United States and we're always talking about Portugal. We're always talking about our food. We're always talking about our culture and everything that it entails. And when you look at podcasts, because again, I listen to podcasts and so does Angela, and there was that missing piece of someone here talking about our food, our culture.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's that little missing link, and also talking about others that are out there that are Portuguese or have a love of Portugal, that are doing wonderful things that we want to make sure we bring it to light.
Exactly, it's great. And the thing is about Portugal and Portugueseness is it's such an underknown thing. In the rest of Europe, a lot of people think that Portugal's just like Spain. And anyway, you wouldn't, if you say to somebody that there's an enormous Portuguese diaspora in America, you will really, you know. And even in America, there's probably a lot of people that don't know. There's lots of Portuguese people and Portuguese descendants of people from the islands and from the mainland. So it's really nice to tell people about it, and it's really nice that you're having this lovely kind of conversation across the whole country as well, with with you two being on separate coasts is hilarious.
Yeah, well, and it's been great too, because, you know, with the popularity of Portugal being in the mainstream news as a popular destination to visit nowadays, I mean, the number of American people or, you know, friends and colleagues that have said, hey, we've decided to go to Portugal. Do you have any recommendations of places for us to go? And we're going to be there for 3 days. Well, first of all, you're not going to be there long enough. But so, you know, and I know that Maria gets the same kind of request. So it was kind of one of those things where, you know, okay, now I have this draft email of all these, you know, places to go in Portugal. But then on the other hand, it's like, but you know what, you live in a great area where there's tons of Portuguese restaurants that are really good, and there's a bakery, and so they don't know about it, but then also find that people in California don't always know all the places in California to go, and people on the East, and same goes for the East Coast. So it's really an awareness thing. I think that's one of the biggest things for us too, is just people, do you know how many amazing restaurants and bakeries and other things are out there that are Portuguese, that are not too far from you, that you could go get? And so that's been a huge eye-opener, I think, for us as well as a lot of other people. Right. So it's been a great experience. But I have to say, one of the things I love about the Stories of Saudade podcast is that it does not necessarily demystify, but, you know, like there was that one about, I forget the name of it, but it was the guy with no arm, and it was the street was named after him, and you think, well, what does that mean? And how did this street become named that? And then you told the story of how it was, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. You know, or the theater, like the history behind the theater in that one town, and the role.
It's fascinating, because it's fascinating for me as well. Like Mark will go and find a story and find someone to tell him a story, and he'll learn something. But there's things that so much more that I learn in things that he's always known because he's grown up with it. And I went, well, and I'll go, what's that? So I'll go and like investigate a little bit more for myself, or just ask him a lot of questions. And it's fascinating. And I love the fact that, you know, this is a tiny country, and people just tend not to be that interested in it and in us. I count me as one of them almost now.
You've been there long enough. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so. People just aren't interested, I mean, in general. And it's so lovely to speak to people and go and show some interest in their life and say, what did you do? How did you get here? What did you do when you were young? And because it's very easy to forget that it's not that long ago since Portugal was a very poor country. It was under this dictatorship, and things were completely different. And it's moved on so quickly. I mean, if you look at Portugal now, it's on a par with the rest of Europe in almost everything. Whereas 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it was a completely, it was very poor.
That's right.
And decades behind other places, and very oppressed. Yeah. And the amount of change that's happened in the last 40 years is incredible. And the change that I've seen just in the almost 20 years that I've been here, it blows my mind, really. So it's fascinating to talk to people who lived through other lives and other things. Like a lot of people we speak to were born in the 30s and 40s, and saw other things and lived a different kind of poverty and lived through it and are still with us. So it's fascinating. Love it.
Well, while we were talking, I went onto Amazon to see if I could get the Eat Portugal book.
Oh, right.
It's all sold out here in the United States, so you need to get more out here.
Well, we shall. I don't know at the moment. I don't know how it is, but we're just about to produce the Spanish version's about to come out. So when that one comes out, there'll probably be some more of the other ones, the English and French. So
that's awesome, and that way we can promote it and have people.
Oh my God, that would be so good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's important. It's important to do that, to support each other. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's something that Maria and I feel very strongly about. It. As soon as another book comes out, we go get it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, the next one I write, I shall send it your way. I'd love to get the English version, because the How Not to Starve in Portugal is actually the translation back into English of the Portuguese version that I wrote, which is Como Não Morrer de Fome em Portugal. But I would love to get that on sale in America. Oh, God.
Yeah.
So,
that would be wonderful.
I'm going to start using it. You sent me the PDFs, and so I'm going to start. People start asking me, "Do you have any tips for what to eat for?" I'm just going to send them the link to that.
The whole thing is the even thought of thinking that you would be even able to starve in Portugal is just non-existent.
Right.
The story is like every chapter is based on a food item, but it's all about the social mores and the culture and how people deal with like everything. But everything always comes back to food.
Always.
Everything, like always. And I talk about the kissing culture and how people are with each other, and just the really funny habits of Portugal. And but it's always food.
And so tell us a little bit about the podcast Pie and some of the things that you talk about there.
Well, that's another. I've always wanted to make that podcast. Like for years, I've been wanting to make that podcast, but I just didn't have the refined idea, nor did I have the audio editing skills before, until I started working on Stories of Saudade and was thrown in at the deep end, sort of trying to learn, because I basically don't edit Stories of Saudade that much, but I do end up learning how to do it. So in the end, I went, sod it, I'm going to do my own. And so I just find a topic and I run with it. So if just occurs to me, I'll talk about the word pie, or I'll talk about a certain kind of pudding that's occurred to me this week. And it's just fun because it's completely free form. I've got no rules. That's the good thing about podcasts, isn't it?
There is no rules.
No,
yeah, there are no rules.
And it's totally your own.
If you're writing a TV show or a radio show, whatever, you've got to stick to the 30 minutes. You've got to do this. You can't swear. You've got to be nice, all blah, 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 blah. With a podcast, I can make a podcast that's 2 minutes long, or half an hour long, or 3 hours long if I want to.
With lots of expletives in it. I mean.
Exactly. Has to.
So do you also cook? Did your mother-in-law teach you how to make the bacalhau à Brás that she...
She's never taught me. I just watch, I observe, because my mother is a cook as well. My mother was a professional cook, and in her youth.
Food is in your blood. I mean,
food's definitely in my blood. Yeah. And my mother never taught me, because I'm unteachable. I mean, I'm a terrible teacher myself, but I'm unteachable. But I observe and I watch, and I just.
Well, that is your way of learning. I mean, yes. That's how I learn. Most of the time, I learn and then I do it myself. But that is, for me, that's that's a wonderful way to learn.
It's the easiest way. I mean, I teach myself everything. I teach myself, and I'll see something, I'll go, right, I bet I know how to make that. And I'll go home and I'll try it, and it doesn't come out quite right, but I work out what's wrong, and then I'll make it myself. So, for instance, for all of the recipes in Eat Portugal, because the Eat Portugal is like a guidebook and a recipe book. So it's for when people are here, they can use it as a glossary. So if they don't know what an alheira is, because nobody on the menu will tell you what an alheira is. We explain what an alheira is.
That's one of my favorite sausages.
I love it.
Oh, yeah, gorgeous. My absolute favorite is farinheira, though.
Really?
I love farinheira. I don't know why, because it took me years to like it.
I think I like them both equally. I mean, yeah.
It depends, because the farinheira, you can do stuff with it. Like an alheira is lovely because you can just eat it. But with a farinheira, you can add it to other things. Like you add it to scrambled eggs, and it's just
Yes. Oh, that's my favorite. Yes, so good. Yes,
We've
that's
talked
delicious.
about this.
Yes.
We have talked about this.
Yes.
So
it's
for the
delicious.
recipes, I went, oh my God, I have to make these, because we made them, all the recipes, and they're all our recipes, or our families or our friends' recipes, and we had to make them for the book. So I had to teach myself quickly how to do things. So, for instance, I taught myself how to make migas alentejana myself, which is one of my favourite things as well, the big stodgy kind.
So how did you make, just a side note, how did you make them? Because I have had them a couple of different ways, and
Right.
are they always like, once it was with spinach, once it was with kale?
Those are migas from up north. So they'll be crumbled up broa with shredded cabbage, and you just fry it down with garlic, and you'll use ready cooked cabbage. It's very like the cabbage you use for caldo verde, and you just shred it and cook it up with some crumbled in broa and some garlic and some azeit, and that's it. But alentejo migas are like, it's more like a sausage in itself.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's amazing. And it's one of those things you go, what? That looks disgusting. It's because it's just basically mushed up bread.
Right.
So you've got some good proper sourdough bread left over that you can't eat as bread anymore. You break it all up. But first you put into your pan, you chop up some chorizo and some tocinho, some bacon, all the very fatty bits, and you fry them. And so you render all the fat out of those into your frying pan. You take out the meat, but you leave all the fat in there, and you've got this lovely orangey coloured fat in the pan. Then you pour in a cup of water, and then you chuck in the bread, just broken up stale bread, and you start mashing it with a fork. And it over time, and you're still doing this over the heat, and over time, it sort of turns itself, and the gluten comes out a bit more, and it just turns into this wonderful homogeneous lump of bread. But it's flavored with all of those flavors from, you could have put in some morcella and some chorizo and some farinheira and bacon, and it comes out, and you serve it as like a side dish, like as if it was like potato or rice or something, and you eat it with meat.
Oh my God.
Now, what's funny is I grew up with a surda, which is your bread soup.
Yep.
And I would always let the bread completely soak up all that,
right?
The fluid, all the
Sure.
broth in it, and I love that. I love that whole thing of bread soup. So now we're going to be leaving Portugal for a little bit here, and we're going now to Italy.
Okay,
and we're in Florence,
right?
and we sit down at the table, and you see a soup that's called twice cooked.
Okay.
And so I turned to the wonderful gentleman and I said, "What is this? Explain to me."
Yeah.
And he said, "It's bread that's soaked in, the broth and all of that stuff. Then it goes back into the pan, and they add into it beans and little bits of meat in it and all of that. And they just, so that is it. That is the soup. It's twice.
Well, I suppose if you took migas and then re-soaked it, you could make some migas.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it.
Wow.
So it's a whole. I was eating it, and I looked at the man, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it was amazing!" With, of course, a little bit of olive oil on top to drizzle it all. And I ate it, and he said, "Well, it's usually someone's meal. I mean, that soup is someone's meal." And I'm like, "Yes, I can see that." Even though I had ordered something else, plate 1, plate 2, plate 3, whatever. And
the tyranny of soup.
Exactly. And it was just amazing. So the thought of that, I've never made that way.
Well, you must. It's so easy once you've got the because you know how Portuguese cookery is. There's no fancy techniques. It's just once you've seen it done, you can usually work it out for yourself. And so once you've worked out how you do the mashing down thing and having the right amount of bread to the right amount of fat, it is so delicious. And then you can either sort of slice it up, or people just take a spoonful of it and stuff, because it's quite solid, Oh, it's so good. You have to try it.
I am so trying that.
Oh my God, seriously, right? Like, I'm just sitting here sort of jaw open, like, oh my God, that just sounds so amazing.
Do you know what reminded me? You were talking about that twice cooked soup. You just made me think of sopa de pedra, which is my absolute favorite soup when it's a good soup. You know how when you get a good minestrone, it's great, but it's like a rubbish minestrone is like, eh. It's the same with sopa de pedra. When you've got a great sopa de pedra, it's amazing. And if it's rubbish, it's just like, everything's gone in it. They've mixed it up. They've boiled it up, and there's your sopa de pedra. But a really good sopa de pedra it's got farinheira in it, and the farinheira is all desfeita. How do I say desfeita? It's like all
dissolved.
It's got dissolved, yeah. And it's thickened the soup, and oh my God, that's good.
You know what? I've never thought about putting farinheira in a soup, and I'm so going to do that now. Because
do you like dumplings?
Brilliant.
It turns into like a kind of a dumpling. So when you make it with, like when you make favas com enchidos, that's one of my favorite things. Favas with sausages and meats and stuff. And if you put bits of farinheira in that, it's like having favas with dumplings. It's so nice.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh my God. Well,
okay, I have to take.
It's lunchtime for me.
Holy crap! All right, now I have to take a trip to Trade Right Market.
Yes.
Go just stock up on some farinheira, and I'm making soup. God damn it! Oh my God! I have to go to Portugal again because
you do.
I mean, every time we have one of these conversations, Maria,
you get hungry.
It's just like, damn it, I want to go.
Well, I'm counting down the days. I'm going in May. I'm going twice, but not to the mainland. I'm going to the Azores.
Oh, okay.
I'm going in May, and then after I'm going in July. And they're both for weddings. But in May, my husband and I are going to take some time, to just be together and just eat and to just enjoy everything there. And of course, I'm counting down the days.
I bet you are.
Because everything is just everything tastes different. Everything tastes better. It just is. I mean,
We're
can't
very
explain
lucky.
it. Yeah, it just, yes, I truly am. I am very lucky that I'm able to go back as often as I do.
Sure.
And coming here I'm on the East Coast.
Yep.
And the East Coast, I mean, in comparison to the West Coast, I have so many different Portuguese restaurants, and some of them like hit it on the mark and they're fantastic. And other ones are like pseudo wannabe Portuguese food that, it's not, it's just because you throw a chouriço in it or linguiça in it does not make it Portuguese, so it just, there is that. But when you go back, it is, our butter is just amazing. Our breads are baked so well. Our vegetables are so fresh. Our meats are so good. I mean, it's just, everything is just amazing.
So I'm curious, Lucy, do you go back are you from London, or where in the UK are you from?
I grew up in Devon, which is in the southwest.
Okay. Did you go back very often?
No, I hardly at all. It's terrible.
Oh, really?
Just because we're always so busy, and the kids, and it's hard. We used to go back for about a month a year when they were babies, but they're teenagers now, and school and university and stuff. It's really complicated, and Rui and I are really always just like really busy with work, and finishing
Yeah.
things and books and projects. So we go at least once a year.
Oh, that's good.
And then we'll try and fit in a weekend in London here and there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't miss it though. I'm just at home now, and it's so much more fun to me. Just sort of still. I mean, I've been here 18 years, and I'm still discovering stuff and just learning and getting entrenched in things.
I love the story that you told us in the beginning. How when you moved in there, you found your book, and on that book you had said, "I'm going to live here one day."
Yeah.
I mean, talk about making a dream reality or making it happen.
But it was complete. I mean, it was complete luck. I mean, it really was. It was.
Well, you know what? And it could have been that you looked for a man who was Portuguese.
No, he definitely just walked into my path. It was completely accidental.
It was meant to be. It was.
Yeah, it was. So, but I'm not afraid of certain things, and the thought of just Portugal's not Australia. I'm only at like a 2-hour flight back from England, and if I didn't like it, I could always go back.
Yeah, well, because I was going to ask, like, do you, so what Maria was describing about, yes, she has access to a plethora of restaurants and stores, but when you go back, it's, there's no comparing. I was wondering if you have sort of a similar experience, because I do know that there are Portuguese restaurants in the UK, at least in London. I don't know about the rest of the country.
But I mean, and you can't go to London actually without bumping into somebody from Portugal. It's maddening.
Oh, it's
really weird. We'll go at occasionally we'll go at Easter or Carnival or something to London, and half of Lisbon is there. And we literally I've not been in London for a weekend when I haven't seen somebody I know. I mean, I've even been standing in a queue in a shop like an H&M or something, and standing next to me was somebody I'd been speaking to 3 weeks before about something. Oh, hello, Sophia. How are you doing? I mean, it's mad. But also you can go into any restaurant in London and there's Portuguese people working in there. And so I'll start speaking Portuguese to them. They're like, oh my God, you're Portuguese. Well, I'm English, but I speak. Oh my God, it's so nice, But I don't miss it because I'm always there for such a short time. I'm catching up on eating like crappy English crisps and chocolates and stuff that I don't get here. So, and then I come back weighing about 3 kilos extra.
Oh, stop it. Now, is the majority of your family still in the UK?
Yeah, all of them. So, I mean, I've got a tiny family, but my sister and her son live in Bristol. My parents still live where I grew up in Devon. My uncle lives in London. And so that's pretty much my family. I mean, a more distant family everywhere else, but I'm the only one in Portugal.
So some of the fun questions we like to ask our guests, one of them is your first food memory. So, I mean, I'm going to ask you 2 memories, right? Because you are from the UK and your mom being a cook, so what was your first food memory there? But then what was your first Portuguese food memory?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah.
Very good one.
Let me think. My first food memory as a kid growing up, golly. Well, I think weirdly, well, hot milk. I used to I cannot stand milk now, but I used to demand hot milk from my mother. Mummy, I want hot milk. Okay. But food-wise, it would have been things like sausages and liver and onions and things.
Oh my gosh, as a kid, really?
Yeah, loved it. Loved it.
Funny.
And then when Portugal, I think the first, I know what it was. When we came here in 91 with art school, we would go off into the Douro Valley and we'd be received by the vineyard owners. And they'd be kind of like English families, but they were Portuguese. They were English families from a long time ago, but with English names, and they spoke English. But they'd serve us up this amazing food. And now, being art students, half of us, not me included, were vegetarians. So the first farm we went to served up a huge spread of like stews and things. There must have been a feijoada. I didn't know what they were at the time, but there was one called chicken foot stew. And it was basically, it was like a bean stew, but with loads of chicken feet. And we thought they were just joking. Oh, it's a funny name for this thing, you see. And so as, you know, so they'd be ladling it out with a cornichon to us. There were like about 20 of us. And as the stew went down in the pot, there emerged these chicken feet, which, and the vegetarians, I mean, one almost actually fainted next to me. It was hilarious.
Oh my God.
So that was fun. But then the next bit that was even more crucial to me was we stayed in one farm and we joined in with the Vindima, which was the most fantastic night of my life, pretty much. We danced in the grapes, and there was a guy with an accordion, and oh God, it was
always
wonderful.
the party. Always.
It was so good. And they gave us for dinner bacalhau com todos, which was just boiled bacalhau, boiled potatoes, boiled chickpeas, boiled cabbage, but hot black olives even.
Did you have a hard-boiled egg?
And hard-boiled egg.
Yes.
It was amazing. And everybody sitting there going, oh my God, what is this crap? I mean, literally, they were like sitting around going, but what is this boiled salty fish? And they just didn't get it. And I was in heaven. I realized that I could take this bottle of azeit and just drench.
Yes. And mix it all together. And,
so good.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
good.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Even today, like my mother, because as you know, I think it was the same in the States for a long time. When I was growing up, olive oil was sold in the pharmacy for cleaning your ears out, and like little tiny bottles. Even today, olive oil is like a luxury, and it's, you know, it must cost like £8 or something for a decent bottle and upwards. And so when I came here to find that I could buy olive oil for like half that price, and the thing is that you use it to drench stuff. It was just such a revelation. My mother comes over and she still can't quite get the hang of this. And I'm like, no, really, it's all right. Just use the olive oil on everything. I love olive oil.
So the olive oil was not used in cooking over there?
No, in the 70s, no. It was only for we had a handful of the equivalent of Julia Child. Like we had oh God, I can't think of a single one now. But writers who were trying to sort of explain that there was a different world out there of food. But, you know, we didn't have certain things, you know. There was some Italian food that was a bit rubbish, and foreign food was rare. In the 80s, thank God, everything changed. But yeah, you wouldn't have had, as a habit, nobody as a habit would have had olive oil in the house at home in the 70s, unless you're incredibly rich.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm trying to think of like an analogy here. I mean, you still don't use it for cooking, but it's almost like if you told somebody, no, go ahead and use rubbing alcohol to make a cocktail, you know. I mean, you obviously wouldn't, but it's
exactly,
you know, the thought of buying olive oil in a pharmacy, that's just so, you know, different. I mean,
it's a different time.
Yeah,
completely different
it's just
time.
Funny to try and wrap your mind.
And the other thing that's really funny and different is eggs, because you know how many eggs go into a Portuguese cake.
Oh my God!
Oh my goodness!
Everything.
Yes.
The more the better.
Because my mother grew up post-war, she was born a year after the war ended, and rationing carried on well into the 1950s. So when she was growing up, you didn't use eggs. I mean, eggs were still seen as, even though they weren't rationed into the 60s, they still felt like they were, because you were so used to, if you haven't used something for years and years and years, you don't just suddenly start using things. So a normal cake would take 2 eggs. Well, a normal cake in Portugal takes about 46. And so I'll sometimes say, you know, when I first started living here, I'd say to my mother on the phone, I said, oh yeah, I made a cake today. It's like, and I put 6 eggs in it. And she'll say, what? What do you mean you put 6 eggs in it? And she's absolutely horrified, because eggs, you know, because of that kind of lasting ghost of rationing. And here I can say to my mother-in-law, how many eggs did you put in that then? She goes, and she'll literally say 26. I'm like, no.
I was going to say there are some recipes where it'd be 12 or 26. Exactly.
Yeah. amazing. And once she said, "Do you know Molotov? It's like a soft
Yes,
meringue." I
that's
love
my
Molotov.
favorite.
It's
one of
so
my
nice
favorites.
because I don't like Molotov and Dostjov. This the yolky stuff.
Yeah.
And so I like caramel Molotov when it's just drenched in caramel and there's no, it's just the egg whites in it. So
Nice.
I said to her one day, "Oh, I really like this. Can you tell me how to make it?" "Oh, yes, but honestly, it's so difficult," she said. I said, "What?" "Oh," she said, "well, I once in an afternoon made 3 and only the third one came out. Finally, it came out well because I finally worked out how to do it. I think she wasn't cooking it in a bain-marie or something. I can't remember." And I said, "Okay, so you made 3 of those in an afternoon. So how many eggs does each one take?" "Oh, 12.
Yes,
So in
that's
one
exactly it.
afternoon, she got through 36 eggs without blinking. To me, that's just so extravagant. It's hilarious. Love it.
And it's just another day in our lives.
Exactly. So, but I'm slowly coming around to like very eggy things, but I still can't. I still don't see the appeal of like eating ovsmolsdiovaid and things like that. It's just egg yolk paste with sugar. Ugh.
Yeah.
So I haven't tried those, so I still have yet to try them. And I love eggs literally any way.
Yeah.
So I always wondered if I would like those because it's a different taste, right?
I think it's genetic. I think you're going to like them.
Okay. So
yeah, I think you will too, honey.
So you kind of went to that. Is there anything else that you found that
there's certain things. I mean, in terms of tastes and flavors, I'll eat anything. But in terms of textures, I'm a bit there. I mean, I don't really like sucking on a pig's nose very much,
right.
And I don't like cartilage very much. It's not because I think it's disgusting. I just don't enjoy kind of that kind of crunch and
texture.
Yeah, the texture is yucky. There are certain things. I mean, a sorza when it's really sloppy, I really don't enjoy that. So I'm much more of a texture person. In terms of flavor, I'll eat anything. I will just eat anything and enjoy most of it. It's just for me, it's a texture thing that I'm a bit weird about. But yeah, no, I'll eat anything.
I'm totally with you. And even if it's like we talk about polvu a lot on the podcast, and Maria's absolutely right. If it's cooked the right way, then it's nice and soft. But if it's a little overcooked, it's too rubbery. And unfortunately, I've had too many overcooked octopus, and so it's not something that I tend to gravitate.
My first octopus that I ever cooked, it was such a trial because I was doing this thing of trying to get the tentacles to curl up. So I was holding it by the head and dunking it into boiling water for seconds and then taking it out. And you do that several times so that the tentacles curl up and stay curled up. And just the horrible feeling of like holding its squishy head was kind of gross. But
Yeah,
I don't care anymore.
I can imagine.
When I was always intimidated by it to begin with, but once I got past it, one of the things I do, I don't care if it's a small, cute little, octopus and all, and you cut the hood and around the hood, you take out the beak, all that stuff. I don't care. I just cut off the tentacles. I do not care about whatever that middle part is going on here. It is beyond something. And all I'm going to eat is the tentacles. Anyway, I don't want to eat its head. I don't, it's just, so once I got past that and I was able to figure out, okay, this is very much like a scallop. The way I cook a scallop is the same way I'm going to cook this. Because I've had people telling me, oh, you have to hit it with a mallet.
No.
You have to bang it to tenderize it.
Oh
So the first time around, I'm banging it away. Oh my God, I pulverized the poor thing.
So you just got smooshed octopus.
Oh my God, it was disgusting.
Some people just freeze it here and freezing it tenderizes.
And that's it. That's the key. The tenderizing it is freezing it, and that tenderizes it.
Yeah.
But that was after being told all kinds of different ways of doing it. It's really the thing of asking a Portuguese person, fellow Portuguese person, to say, how do you make that? And having them say to you, the first line, and I started laughing when you said this, is when your mother-in-law said, oh, it's very hard and difficult. That is like the very first thing that
Oh,
I'm always told when I ask someone, and
it's
especially if
so
they're
wrong.
older. Especially if
Yeah.
they're older. And
It's
you go,
mad.
oh, how do you make that? Oh, querida, é muito difícil. Oh, it's so hard.
É
Oh,
muito complicada.
yeah, é tão complicado. Leva horas para fazer. Ai, you know, no. And you know what? There
It's
are
so funny.
a lot of them just don't want to give you that recipe.
No,
Exactly.
exactly. And also there's this kind of culture of if somebody hasn't taught you, you don't know it. So for instance, my mother-in-law, I could be kind of chopping up some garlic in my way, and she'll say, oh, I've never been shown how to do that. And I'm just going, look at what I'm doing. I'm chopping it up this way. Just do it. If that, you know, oh no, I've never been taught. You have to teach me. No, just learn.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a mixed up way that from that same idea of, you know, there's somebody higher up in the chain teaches you how to do something, and they don't feel like they can teach you something if they're not like specifically your mother or your mother-in-law. But also there's another thing of, I don't know if this is translated to Portuguese descendants in America, but QB, quanto basta. It's the most annoying thing in recipes that you can imagine. So, you know, when you've got a recipe that says add salt to taste, so just enough salt for it to be right. Well, in a Portuguese recipe, if you go online and look up Portuguese recipes, it's so many things that say QB. Like, so it'll say, to make a cake, right, you need 406 eggs, a spoonful of sugar, and enough flour. Like QB flour.
Yes.
What is
Yes.
this? It's
Yes.
insane. And that's another reason why I've had to teach myself how to cook, because all the recipes say QB, enough flour, enough sugar, enough eggs, and 14 bottles of dessert.
And put it in the oven until it's done.
I know. No temperature.
No temperature. No
there's
time.
nothing.
Just put it in there until it's done. Yep.
So it's like it's an Illuminati of old ladies and their recipes. That's what it is. It's one big conspiracy.
I think you're right. I think, you know, it's funny. And, you know, in writing my cookbook, it was the same thing. I'm reading stuff that my mom, what little she wrote down was exactly that. Yeah. Sometimes it was just ingredients and not even what the quantities are of these ingredients. And then other times it was, but of course, you know, she had passed and it couldn't be like, okay, Mom, what is this? Yeah. And then when you go to ask someone else, they're like, oh, well, that all depends on, you know, then there's a big story behind it. Well, it depends how many people, you know, it depends on, you know, so yeah, it is I never thought of that. I think you're right. It's the Illuminati of older Portuguese women.
Definitely.
Well, I was going to say perhaps it's because, you know, back in the day when they were cooking with, you know, fire ovens and there was really no temperature gauge, things like that. But I think you still find that even today when ladies are cooking with, you know, modern day ovens that have a temperature gauge or anything like that. I have one experience where my mother-in-law makes a lamb dish that's really, really good. And so I asked her for the recipe. And this goes back to they really don't want to share the real recipe with you, or they give you things that are just a little off, right? So she told me there was like 12 onions in this thing. And there are a lot of onions. And all right, fine. So I go to the store and I buy 12 onions and I say, you know, is this the pan that I have is about the size of the pan that she uses. Yeah. And I you know, you're supposed to chop them up real fine. I get about 4 or 5 onions in, and the whole dish is full of onions, and I'm like, there's no way there's 12 onions in this thing. Like she's
a member of the Illuminati.
She's a member, absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely. On the recipe that I wrote down from her, I like crossed out 12, and I was like, you only need, you know, 4 or whatever it is. So I totally get it. And then, you know, even when you were out here, Maria, and we went to the bakeries and asking some of the ladies, I need a recipe for this. Oh, no. I'm not going to give it to you.
I still have not found the right recipe that I can produce.
Yeah.
A queijada de feijão.
Oh, no, I haven't either. I've never tried. But queijada de Sintra, I can do with my eyes shut. But with
really?
feijão,
that's awesome.
It's so easy.
Really?
Yeah, it's so easy. It's so easy.
Okay.
It's just requeijão and ricotta if you
Ricotta.
can't.
Yep.
And a bit of egg. But this is by eye. So take some ricotta, beat like an egg into it, beat up a spoonful of flour to sort of hold it together, and cinnamon. And if you want to put a tiny bit of nutmeg in as well. That's the middle. That's the center. I mean, that's the middle of a queijada de Sintra.
Is it really?
And then what about the cup? Is a cup?
The cup is just a completely basic water pastry. That's it. It's just really, really, really thin. You got it. That's the hard bit. That's the only hard bit, really. But you can also make a tarte requeijão without any pastry. It's just the filling, and it's like bigger. It's like a plate-sized thing. And it's in our book, actually. It's in Eat Portugal, the recipe.
I can't get that book. Gosh,
oh my God, it's so good. It's so delicious. Celia is the absolute expert on that one. And every time we go somewhere, like going to someone's house for dinner or something, she'll bring one, and it's just luscious.
So just ricotta?
It's just ricotta, egg.
An egg, a spoonful of flour, cinnamon,
and nutmeg.
Yeah. And sugar, of course. I forgot sugar. Yeah. So... but it's delicious. I'll go and find the recipe later and I'll send it to you.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, you know what I love about the queijadas de Sintra is because those are the ones they sell at the bullfight, right? In the little tube. Yeah. And because they're small enough where you just sort of eat them one after another, right? Where when I sit down with a pastel de nata or one of the other ones, I'm like, I'll have one. Yeah. And then I'm good, that's right? It, but like no, the queijadas de Sintra, like I'll eat the whole roll.
Yeah. Oh, tell me, in the States at the moment, is there this kind of great big thing about pastéis de nata like there is in Britain? Because everyone has just suddenly decided that there is one thing that Portugal's famous for, and it's the pastel de nata, and it's driving me insane. Like people get off the aeroplane and say, "Take me to my first pastel de nata." And I'm like, what are you talking like 10, 15 years ago? I mean, there's always been pastéis de nata and there's always been pastéis de Belém, whatever. But they were not the national dish of Portugal. Yeah. And they still aren't. But everybody has gone nuts about it.
Yeah, the big craze is the pastel de nata. Absolutely.
I would say East Coast a lot, though, because out here in California, you just can't get them very, very well. Yeah. But yeah, East Coast for sure. And so you see a lot of it on social media. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's even the cover of our book.
Oh my God.
That is true. I was going to say that is the cover of your book, Lucy.
Because, it appeals to people because it's just, I mean, I will sometimes people in publications and websites in Britain ask me to do like what to eat in Portugal, and I'll tell them and I'll do a list without a pastel de nata, and they'll ring me up and they'll say, "Where's the pastel de nata?"
Now, let me ask you this, Lucy. Have you ever thought of doing a food tour?
Well, Celia runs food tours, my co-author of Eat Portugal. So she does.
Wonderful.
So she works for a company called Culinary Backstreets. So we started doing tours off the back of the book, basically, when it first came out, a couple of years after it came out. I've got other things to do and I'm not very good at it. Well, I just don't want to do it all the time. But Celia is great at it, and she's really in, and she loves telling people about absolutely everything that we eat. And now she works with a company called Culinary Backstreets, who they have cities all over the world where they do food tours. In Istanbul, in Barcelona, in Tokyo, New York. I mean, everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Wow!
And so Celia heads up the Lisbon end, and they've got about a few guides, and there's about 4 different tours that you can do, and some take like 3 or 4 hours, and some take the whole day, and it's a walking tour, gentle walking tour, but a walking tour around the city, eating all the way.
I love it. Now, so for our listeners that are listening out there, we will make sure that we include the link to this Culinary Backstreets, so that if you're visiting Lisbon and you want to do it and know all about the food and taste it all along the way and see Lisbon at the same time, I think that is an amazing way to do it.
Thank you. That's great. Well, it's just culinarybackstreets.com.
Perfect.
And you can get to all their cities that way. And it's a really lovely way because it's more than just the food. It's the history and it's the food culture and multiculturalism. It's really, really fascinating.
I love it.
I'm doing it. Next time. It's on my list already for the next time we go. Well, ladies, as
Yes.
you know, we said at the very beginning, an hour flies by, so there's no
It
way we could
does.
ever keep it
we
shorter
can
to
keep
an hour.
going. We can absolutely keep going here.
Just
Uh,
wind me up and I'll just.
Well, you know,
talk
I was gonna ask one last thing, and that is, or one thing I wanted to ask: what is next, Lucy? What is next?
Well, I'm trying to think of my next book, culinary book project. I got a couple of things in mind, but until the 12th of May, I'm a bit busy because I'm one of the team that's making the Eurovision Song Contest here in Portugal.
What?
Yeah, so that's my current occupation until May 12th. So that's the final, and then we're done, unless we win again.
So you're singing?
No, because last year Portugal won. Salvador Sobral won in Kiev.
That's right.
Amar pelos dois, which is just, I hear it every day. It's like, and I still love it. So so we're hosting, and I got asked to be part of the team because the whole thing these days is entirely in English. And so I'm there helping with script writing and Englishifying stuff.
Oh, when you said that, I thought, oh my God, she's performing too.
Oh, no.
Like, what does this woman not do, right?
Yes. What can't she do?
That I don't do. I wouldn't subject you to that, honestly. That would be awful. So no, that's an absolute blast. I'm having absolute time of my life with that. As you can imagine, it's very very hard work, but it's very fun.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much, Lucy.
Thank you.
And we'll include links to both of your podcasts as well, because I really want people to listen. They're fun, and you get to learn some interesting history that you would never ever learn anywhere else. It's really cool.
And by the time this comes out, the Valentine's special.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
We're publishing it tonight because tomorrow is Valentine's Day.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah,
I cannot wait to hear it. That'll be
so cute.
Yeah. We'll include. I'll go ahead and include the link to that episode for our listeners. It's Valentine's. I sent Lucy 3 minutes of a recording of, our connection to Portugal, and she turned it into a 15-minute podcast. I don't know how that happens, but
I'm still amazed how we did it. I was thinking, because when you sent the story, it was a few weeks ago now, wasn't it? And and you sent the story, and I listened, and I sent it straight to Marco. I said, "There, listen." And he wrote straight back, "Oh my God, this is so good. We got to do right now." And then remembered Valentine's Day was coming too. So.
Well, and it's funny because when I sent it, it was literally like I tried to keep it as short and succinct as possible because I thought it was just going to be one of many stories in like.
I mean, we were thinking it was going to be. Then we started working on it and went, this is good because we can spread it out a bit. So his bit, he's translating for you into Portuguese. And mine, I'm just waffling.
No, you have a perfect voice. You do a great job narrating. It's actually a really, really well done.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I think we have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we'll have to make a date to all meet in Portugal someday.
Oh, do you know that's after this year of doing all the stuff in the Azores. I want to go to the mainland. That'll be next year.
That's obligatory. Absolutely obligatory. We'll all go out for lunch.
Oh,
and we'll record an episode.
Yes.
Around the table.
I love it. I love that.
That'll be a co-episode of Pie and Our Portuguese Table.
That would be amazing. I love it.
Brilliant.
And that is a date. We should make a date.
Está combinado.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lucy. It has been
such a
pleasure. Yeah, no, you're so lovely, and
you guys
loved every bit of it. And thanks, listeners out there, for being with us again. We hope that you had as much fun listening as we did talking and doing all of this. And please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you haven't written a review, please do. Lucy can tell you that the more reviews we get, it does make a difference. We're not lying on this.
And we know you're listening. We know you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so please write us a review on iTunes. That would be really, really helpful. And of course, share this podcast, share stories of saudade and pie. Please share with your friends and family to spread the word about Portuguese food and culture and everything that's so wonderful about everything we have to share with the world. And so with that, it's a wrap, and we'll say
Até a próxima. Até a próxima, querida.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening to our Portuguese Table podcast.
If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so on SoundCloud or iTunes.
And all episodes can be found on our website at www.ourportuguesetable.com.
You can also reach us at feedback@ourportuguesetable.com with comments, questions, or suggestions. Até a próxima!